Russia paid a heavy price for the territory it seized in southeastern Ukraine, dedicating months and thousands of soldiers to establish a foothold that President Putin believed would enable a major summer offensive in 26. The initial incursions involved intense combat, with Russian forces using mechanized infantry, artillery, and air support to secure key towns and infrastructure for a prolonged campaign aimed at consolidating control over critical supply routes and strategic positions. However, high casualties, logistical issues, and fierce Ukrainian resistance gradually weakened these efforts, causing significant attrition among frontline units, straining command structures. Despite extensive planning and expectations of swift victory, Putin's assumptions were proven wrong as Ukraine reversed the situation through a well-coordinated counteroffensive combining tactical innovation with effective intelligence and battlefield awareness. In just 1 month, Ukrainian forces reclaimed about 400 square kilometers, including 8 settlements formerly under Russian control, signaling a dramatic momentum shift. This rapid advance caused the collapse of Putin's southeastern front, disrupted Russian supply routes and command structures, and lowered troop morale, already undermined by earlier setbacks and logistical failures. The counterattack was led by highly trained airborne units working closely with infantry and mechanized forces, employing advanced drones for reconnaissance and precision strikes to soften defenses before launching ground assaults. Infantry and mechanized units quickly secured and fortified regained areas to repel potential Russian counterattacks, establishing defensive perimeters and enhancing communication networks to maintain momentum. Fighting was intense around Alexandrivka, a vital village at the crossroads of Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts, whose capture disrupted Russia's plans for further advances and complicated resupply efforts. This counteroffensive builds on Ukraine's previous success in Donetsk last September, where fortified defenses halted Putin's costly assault on Bakhmut, marking a turning point. The current offensive shows no signs of slowing, exploiting Russia's loss of key logistical hubs like the critical city of Staling, essential for troop movements and material distribution. In response, Russia deployed experimental technologies such as 5-equipped balloons to restore communications across contested areas. But these proved short-term fixes and failed to reinstate full operational capability, leaving Russian forces with severe communication challenges that hampered coordination and response. This breakdown in command allowed Ukrainian forces to exploit chaos within Russian ranks, coordinating attacks with greater precision and speed, leveraging real-time intelligence to outmaneuver opponents. Analysts predict the situation will worsen for Russia as Ukraine's strategy remains adaptive and focused on exploiting weaknesses to regain territory and push further into occupied zones. Ukrainian resilience and tactical ingenuity signal a broader shift in the conflict, suggesting Russia's initial gains may be irreversibly undermined by sustained Ukrainian operations and ongoing international support, which continues to provide Kyiv with advanced weaponry, intelligence sharing, and diplomatic backing critical to maintaining momentum on the battlefield. Ukraine has effectively advanced its objectives by prioritizing the preservation of its defenders' lives and health, while simultaneously strengthening defenses and building forces across the entire front, including key supply and communication lines that are vital for sustained military operations. Siski, in a detailed Telegram post, highlighted Ukraine's systematic, coordinated efforts to liberate territory, carefully planning operations with military strategists, intelligence experts, and logistical coordinators to minimize unnecessary and heavy casualties, an approach that has been a cornerstone of their success. This meticulous planning includes the integration of advanced reconnaissance technologies, drone surveillance, and real-time battlefield intelligence to anticipate and counter Russian maneuvers effectively. This approach contrasts sharply with Russia's strategy, where President Putin appears to lack a coherent or adaptive plan beyond the costly tactic of sending waves of poorly supported troops into battle, resulting in catastrophic losses. 65,000 Russian soldiers killed or wounded in 2026 alone, according to NATO Secretary General Mini. If this rate of attrition continues, Russia could lose approximately 390,000 soldiers by the end of the year, a grim and sobering figure that starkly reflects the enormous human cost Russia is paying in its attempts to retake territory that Ukraine has recently liberated. With Russia's southeastern front facing a significant collapse, Ukraine's recent gain of 400 square kilometers marks a crucial turning point in the conflict, signaling a clear shift in momentum and battlefield control that has significant implications for the wider war effort. Newsweek reported on February 17 that Ukraine's territorial gains since launching its southeastern counteroffensive had already surpassed the combined advances of the previous 2.5 years, with 201 kilometers reclaimed. Just a week later, these gains doubled, dramatically reshaping the dynamics of the battlefield. And key settlements such as Nashivka, Pashana, Andreyka, Radizna, Ostapska, and Nova Zaporizhia were retaken, effectively thwarting Russian plans to use these locations as staging grounds for further offensives, especially in the critical Alexandrivka sector, which controls vital supply routes essential for sustaining military operations and enabling Siski emphasized Ukraine's expert clearing of Russian forces from these strategic areas, which have now become strongholds for ongoing offensive operations and defensive posturing, allowing Ukraine to consolidate gains and prepare for subsequent phases of their campaign. Reports confirm that Russian forces withdrew from these zones at least 2 weeks before February 24th, indicating a significant retreat under mounting pressure and eroding morale among Russian ranks. Ukraine's counteroffensive also secured vital supply lines, ensuring uninterrupted delivery of ammunition, fuel, and advanced weaponry, as well as the efficient evacuation of wounded soldiers, which has been crucial in sustaining operational momentum and maintaining high troop morale and combat effect. In sum, Russia's advances have been stalled and decisively reversed within about a month, positioning Ukraine for future developments with renewed confidence and a clear strategic advantage in both tactical engagements and broader operational planning. This remarkable turnaround not only counters Putin's flawed strategy, but also signals Ukraine's resilience, determination, and ability to adapt and prevail against overwhelming odds in a protracted and complex conflict. Putin faced an unexpected humiliation he was unprepared for, and while Russia's leader's embarrassment benefits Ukraine, deeper strategic reasons drive Ukraine's aggressive southeast push. This offensive counters a narrative Putin has promoted for years, portraying Russia as an unstoppable military force and Ukraine as a crumbling state on the verge of collapse, a claim that anyone closely following the conflict has come to recognize as fundamentally false and misleading. Ukraine must periodically reinforce this reality, especially during critical moments when Putin succeeds in convincing key global players, such as the United States and its Western allies, that Russia is on the brink of achieving a decisive victory. Ukraine's massive counteroffensive, launched with meticulous planning and significant coordination among its armed forces, shatters this illusion decisively. Victories such as the successful clearing of Kupiansk, a strategic transportation hub, and the reclamation of key surrounding villages, not only signal Ukraine's ongoing resolve, but also demonstrate its ability to regain lost territory and disrupt Russian supply lines effectively, thereby hindering Russia's operational capabilities. According to detailed analyses published by the Wall Street Journal, the fact that the war has now entered its 5th year starkly contradicts Putin's initial claims and public assurances of a swift and triumphant campaign. Ukraine's recent successes serve as a powerful message to the US and its allies, clearly indicating that Ukraine remains far from defeat and that the Russian military is not the invincible force Putin claims it to be. Seth Jones, a prominent expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, notes that Putin's increasingly desperate attempts to convince the US that Russia is winning represent a big breakthrough narrative designed to mask a war that Russia fundamentally cannot win. Beyond these immediate tactical victories, Ukraine is also strategically preparing to continue exerting pressure and destroying more Russian forces well into 2026, leveraging the momentum gained from current operations to build a longer-term advantage. Another critical reason driving the counteroffensive is Ukraine's strategy to compel Putin to deploy his reserves in the occupied territories where Ukraine wants them to be, rather than in areas that Russia had originally planned or considered secure. This strategic maneuver forces the Russian military to spread its forces thin and reconsider its defensive priorities. Captain Dymir Filov, commander of Ukraine's 1st Separate Assault Regiment, emphasizes that Ukraine's focus is not necessarily on making the deepest territorial penetration possible, but rather on securing strategic advantages that will maximize pressure on Russian forces and disrupt their operational plans. By seizing the initiative and dictating the pace and location of engagements, Ukraine effectively controls the battlefield dynamics, forcing Russia to stretch its resources dangerously thin, weaken its defensive positions in areas it had previously assumed would remain secure for the foreseeable future. This shifting of the strategic landscape not only bolsters Ukrainian morale, but also complicates Russia's ability to regroup, resupply, and mount effective counterattacks, thereby increasing Ukraine's chances of sustained success in the ongoing conflict. More Russian soldiers are dying after being deployed in operations vastly different from those they were trained for, resulting in a significant depletion of Russia's military reserves at a time when President Putin would least want it, while simultaneously weakening Russian thereby creating further opportunities for Ukraine to capitalize. Putin was forewarned about such developments. In January, Sasky himself revealed that Ukraine was planning new offensive operations in 2026, signaling a strategic shift that Russia failed to adequately prepare for. Wola reported the Ukrainian military's commander-in-chief stating, therefore, we will conduct a strategic defensive operation. At the same time, we understand you cannot win by defense alone. Accordingly, we will carry out offensive operations and fight to maintain operational initiative because that forces the enemy to commit and withdraw significant manpower, weapons, and ammunition to contain our active actions. Tsai had already clarified what was unfolding for Putin before the offensive even began. Yet despite this foresight, Russia remained powerless to respond effectively to Ukraine's advances. Ukraine's systematic approach to achieving its most recent advances was clearly planned well in advance, with Ukraine confident enough to reveal its strategy because it was certain of victory. Everything that Sersky predicted has come to pass, and it appears Ukraine's strategy of exhausting Russia's reserves is successfully working. As Euronews reported on February 20th, Russia is now considering rolling and involuntary military call-ups, which essentially amounts to a covert mobilization designed to push more reserves into Ukraine's battle zones. With volunteers dwindling rapidly, Russia is forced to send unwilling personnel to fill the gaps Ukraine is creating. This is a brilliant tactic by Ukraine as it now controls the situation in the southeast. Gaining this control ties back to a theme hinted at throughout the video. Although Ukraine is currently on the offensive, this advance is being made with defense firmly in mind. Why? Because Ukraine is acutely aware of Russia's plans for the summer. In early February, the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, reported that Russian military command is preparing for a large-scale offensive targeting Ukraine's southern and eastern territories. The very regions where Ukraine is currently making gains. This offensive was already in doubt before news of Ukraine's advances emerged. As EW noted that Russia likely lacks the reserves necessary to achieve its objectives, which appear to include pushing toward the Donetsk cities of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, as well as toward Zaporizhia city and Oriki. Russia was already struggling to seize the territory needed to launch these offensives, and now it has lost even more ground. Ukraine will not remain idle after liberating 400 kilometers of territory along the axis of Russia's intended advance. Rather, strengthening defenses will soon become a priority, with fortification efforts likely underway and expected to intensify once Ukraine completes its current push. Andrei Kroarov, a reserve officer in the Ukrainian armed forces, essentially confirmed this to UNMIN when discussing Ukraine's historic counteroffensive, noting that Ukraine had been somewhat lax in its defense of Zaporizhia, even as Russia amassed about 150,000 reserves in that area. It became clear that Ukraine did not have sufficiently strong defenses there, vulnerability that it intends to rectify moving forward. The Russians brought in reserves and occupied certain positions, but Ukraine's counteroffensive has reclaimed some areas, signaling to Putin that Ukraine won't allow further territorial losses without a fierce and determined response. If Russia plans a large-scale summer offensive into southeastern Ukraine, it must advance through extensive, meticulously prepared kill zones that Ukraine has painstakingly established by liberating territory over months of strategic planning, intelligence gathering, and intense combat operations. These kill zones, which can extend up to 20 kilometers beyond the established front lines, are heavily fortified with a complex network of trenches, minefields, anti-tank barriers, and utilize natural terrain features such as rivers, ravines, swamps, and dense forests that effectively channel Russian forces into deadly traps designed to maximize casualties. Barbed wire entanglements, rows of dragon's teeth, concrete obstacles, deep anti-tank ditches, and layered minefields significantly slow Russian troop movements and mechanized vehicles, exposing them to continuous and overwhelming artillery, rocket, and missile strikes from multiple directions. Thousands of drones, operating both for reconnaissance and precision attack missions, constantly surveil the battlefield, identifying weak points and targeting Russian forces as they become entangled in defensive positions or attempt to regroup, disrupting their command and control. Ukraine's layered defenses are deliberately arranged to funnel Russian troops into narrow choke points and kill zones, enabling devastating, coordinated strikes by drones, long-range missiles, artillery bombardments, and even electronic warfare measures that degrade Russian communications and targeting capabilities. This sophisticated defense strategy is proactively designed not only to degrade Russian offensive capabilities, but also to ensure that every meter of ground gained by Russian forces comes at a tremendous cost in manpower and material, thereby eroding their overall operational momentum and morale. Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov recently outlined Ukraine's strategic vision for 2026, which aims to inflict as many as 50,000 Russian casualties monthly through highly coordinated multi-domain operations that leverage these kill zones to break the Russian will to fight and undermine their capacity for sustained offensive operations. By consistently outmaneuvering Russian forces through superior tactics, real-time intelligence, advanced weaponry, and leveraging the natural advantages of the terrain, Ukraine is committed to forcing a negotiated peace on terms favorable to Kyiv by demonstrating it can inflict unacceptable losses, thereby ensuring that Russia pays. This approach underscores Ukraine's resolve to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity while signaling to Moscow that any further aggression will be met with relentless resistance and escalating costs, reshaping the operational landscape of the conflict in Ukraine's favor and setting it for future defensive operations. It also highlights the critical role of international support and advanced military technology in enhancing Ukraine's defensive capabilities, reinforcing the importance of sustained aid and cooperation from global partners in the ongoing struggle to preserve freedom and stability in the region. Putin's forces are now heading into a summer of intense hardship that could surpass any challenges they've encountered so far in the war. Russia did not anticipate these developments. Its troops are already being encircled and decimated in various parts of Ukraine, with the same grim outcome looming in the southeast. Ukraine's kill zone strategy has inflicted devastating losses in personnel, armored vehicles, and financial resources. To learn more about how these smart tactics are impacting Russian forces, you can watch our detailed video. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe to the Military Show for in-depth analysis of the events unfolding behind the headlines in Ukraine. Thank you for watching.